Athletes from Russia and Belarus will not be allowed to compete at the Winter Paralympics in Beijing after the International Paralympic Committee reversed its original decision. The IPC was heavily criticized when, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it initially said it would allow the athletes to compete as neutrals. That led to huge protests from other nations who threatened not to compete unless the decision was reversed.
In the last 12 hours, an overwhelming number of members have been in touch with us and being very open, for which I am grateful. They have told us that if we do not reconsider our decision, it is now likely to have grave consequences for the Beijing 2022 Paralympic Winter Games. Multiple national Paralympic committees, some of which have been contacted by the governments, teams, and athletes, are expressing their intention not to compete. Ensuring the safety and security of athletes is of paramount importance to us, and the situation in the athletes' village is escalated and has now become untenable. With this in mind, and in order to preserve the integrity of these games and the safety of all participants, we have decided to refuse the athlete entries from RPC and NPC Belarus. To the para-athletes from the impacted countries, we are very sorry that you are affected by the decisions that your government took last week in breaching the Olympic truce. You are victims of your government's actions.
And for more on this situation, we are going to cross live to Lape Olarinoye, our Rise News correspondent live in London. Thank you for joining us today, Lape. Can you tell us more about this sudden U-turn by the IPC and whether or not this comes as any surprise?
Hi, good afternoon to you all. Well, in answer to your question, Howard, it's not really a surprise. This is, of course, because of mounting pressure within the field of sports. We've seen it across different sports. We've seen it in tennis, we've seen it in football, in boxing, and even Formula One car racing, whereby players, as well as the organizations responsible for those sports, have also come out very quickly to denounce athletes from Russian backgrounds, as well as now Belarus as well, stating that, they will not be allowing them to compete. We've also had a lot of sports players being very expressive about their stance on the conflict. And so, of course, it's not really a surprise. And actually, it allows the Paralympic Committee to stand out like a sore thumb if they too weren't following suit along with all their other counterparts. Whereby people have publicly come out to denounce this issue. So, to summarize, it's not really a surprise. I mean, potentially, it's probably going to spread across more sports where there's a kind of unified voice and unified response to the conflict happening, particularly in the world of sport. It's a timely year for sports as well. So, of course, we can see that conflict come to the field of sports.
Well, Lape, what are the implications for Russian and Belarusian athletes at this point?
Well, that's an interesting question you ask. There are strong implications for this, mainly because they are almost used as scapegoats in a wider governmental political conflict. And a lot of Russian athletes, a lot of Russian sports personalities have actually publicly come out to state that, they are not in support of the war. Many have joined the protests to state that, they aren't on the side of their countries. They don't agree with what the Russian government is doing. So unfortunately, they're going to face the wrath of this from Western countries, from, their careers are going to be largely impacted. And if we look specifically at the IPC, many of the Russian and Belarusian Paralympic athletes actually have, a very difficult life where they're coming from. It's very tough to be a disabled person in Russia. And so the way in which it is set up in Russia is that actually they're only paid based on the number of medals that they get. So, of course, being, disqualified and suspended, if you like, from participating in the games means that it really impacts them financially, it impacts them professionally as well. So it's unfortunate that they're being caught up in this crossfire.
Well, Lape, since the invasion began, sports has been impacted across many levels. Can you talk to us a bit more about this?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, across different sports, we've seen kind of it be politicized. The issue happening in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, has been largely politicized. And we've seen that really come to the fore in the world of sports. I mean, even if you look at in football, there have been sponsorships suspended. There have been, banning of Russian football players from playing other teams. We've also seen it in Formula One, whereby, where Russia happens to be a large sponsor and actually have their own cars as well as their own drivers, who have also faced the implications of this, even in tennis as well, in boxing as well. We've seen a lot of the Ukrainian boxers come out and actually pledge their support to fight for their country and fight for the army. And so there has been a huge expression from not only the sports bodies, but also the sports players themselves, really criticizing what the Russian government is doing, as well as even being very expressive about their stance. On the other hand, we also know that Chelsea, for example, just yesterday, Roman Abramovich, who is a Russian oligarch, has said that he's going to sell the club, and actually the loans that they owe, he's happy for them to give that money to Ukrainian charities and so on. So there has been kind of implications right from the top all the way down to the bottom. And just to add on to that as well, if we look at kind of the overall response, it hasn't just been a unification of response from sports bodies. There's also been people that have not wanted to comment on it. I mean, for example, the IPC made this U-turn just today. But actually, if you look at other football clubs, like the coach of Chelsea, Thomas Tuchel, he stated yesterday that he doesn't want to be involved. He's not a politician and doesn't want to comment on politics. So there are some people that in the sports world that are still very neutral and don't believe in politicizing it. But overall, there has been a unified stance against the conflict.
Arise London correspondent Lape Olarinoye, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.